Liches are a staple D&D villain. Even people outside of the tabletop community know Vecna thanks to Stranger Things or Zastam thanks to the recent D&D movie. But despite their reputation as powerful spellcasters, Liches aren't particularly threatening in combat, at least not on their own. But hear me out, I think that's actually better for a big bad who's meant to be the ultimate antagonist for an entire campaign arc. That means you need to make sure that your Lich's story, character, and roleplay are rock solid, because that's what you're building the conflict of your campaign on. So let's work together to develop your Lich Big Bad in 3 simple steps. Step 1 is nailing down the core elements that every Lich needs. These are the things that make a Lich a Lich. First and foremost, they are undead. You can represent this in a ton of different ways. Maybe they smell like decomposing flesh and are always surrounded by a cloud of buzzing flies. Or maybe they wear a mask or helmet to hide their undead nature, or use illusion magic to hide in plain sight and masquerade as a regular mortal. Maybe they're so ancient that much of their flesh has rotted away, leaving them withered and skeletal. Ask yourself how the fact that they're undead is going to show up in your roleplay and description. For example, if their soft tissue is so deteriorated that they no longer have lips or a tongue, they might communicate exclusively through telepathy, or with a detached magical voice. Maybe the body is literally puppeted by strings of glowing necrotic energy, with the Lich's mind acting as a puppet master. Maybe the pieces of their body can detach and operate independently, so they can send their hand off on errands like Thing in the Addams Family. Remember, the sky is the limit here. You don't have to just regurgitate undead cliches. Liches aren't your average zombie. They're incredibly powerful, brilliant casters who designed and constructed their undeath with intention. Think about all the different ways that could look. The weirder you get with it, the more memorable and impactful your villain will be. The next core feature is, of course, the vessel to which they bind their soul. This makes it so that even if their body is struck down, the soul is returned to the vessel and the Lich lives on. Now, the classic approach to this is to just have it be a fancy container, like a jar or a box. But in my opinion, this is one of the places you can really get clever and subvert your players' expectations. A Lich's soul jar is their most protected, most important possession. They will do whatever they can to prevent people from finding, identifying, and destroying it. Ask yourself, what would you do if your life depended on hiding and defending just one material item of your choice? For a highly intelligent being like a Lich, the answer probably isn't tie my soul to a fancy jar and hide it in the back room of a dungeon. We can do so much better than that. What if the Lich binds their soul to a commonplace item, making it especially difficult to track down, such as a book stored in a massive library? Bonus, that concept opens up an incredible opportunity for a long-term word puzzle to help players figure out the title of the book they're looking for. Or maybe instead of shouldering the burden of protecting their own soul jar, a smart Lich might outsource its guardianship by binding their soul to an item that is already strongly protected, like the crown passed down from monarch to monarch. That way, even if the party figures out the item's true purpose, there are some very real obstacles to reaching it. In the past, official D&D content has claimed that the item used for a Lich's soul jar needs to be made from a solid material and cost at least a few thousand gold pieces. But I think you should feel very comfortable ignoring those kinds of stipulations if they limit your creativity. By all means, if you want your Lich to bind their soul to an ancient tree or their own reflection or a living dragon, you're the one who makes the rules. Lichdom can look however you want it to look in your world. The final element that all Liches share is that they're spellcasters. Becoming a Lich is a magic ritual, so in order to become one, you gotta have access to magic. They're mostly wizards, although in some past editions, they've pulled from other casting classes. Now, to me, this is one of those know the rules before you break them things. If your Lich is a wizard, then great. Think through their history as a wizard. How and why did they learn magic? What school of magic did they specialize in? What wizardly ambition or fixation caused them to pursue Lichdom? But if you want to step outside of the box in terms of your Lich's background, I think you should go for it. Just make sure that's something that you're thinking about and factoring into your character. A Lich who was a cleric is going to look very different from a Lich who was a warlock. You can even base a Lich on a non-caster class. In fact, there's a YouTuber who does a whole series about reimagining Liches as different classes. He even has free downloads with stat blocks and stuff for each one. What was his name again? It was like Spiky Hat or something.
And I made a Bard Lich, they stay alive as long as someone remembers their song. And then I made a Sorcerer Lich, and they stay alive as long as it has direct descendants with their blood. What else? Oh yeah, then I made a Druid Lich. It stays alive as long as their soul is connected to...
Great having you, Pointy Hat, but I'm sure you have tons to do.
Oh, no, don't worry, I've got all day. I also have an Artificer Lich, and that one stays alive.
I'm sure I'll think of it eventually. Anyway, to me, those are the 3 basics of a Lich character. If you're creating a Lich for your campaign, make sure they're undead, make sure you know what vessel they've bound their soul to and how they're gonna guard it, and make sure that they're a caster. Or if you're gonna change any of those things up, which you should totally feel free to do, just make sure that you're doing that with intention. Okay, so you've got an idea of what your Lich is going to be like, but creating a scary villain isn't enough, and that's because a villain and a big bad are not the same thing. We'll talk about that in a second, but first, the Lich wants to talk to you, and I'm gonna be honest, I am very scared of telling her no.
Let me guess, another mortal here to ask why I would give up my living flesh and commit myself to the most malignant of magics. It's simple. I needed more time to unlock the secrets of true power in the pages of Deep Magic Volume 2 from today's sponsor, Kobold Press. Trust me, I know my way around a spellbook, but this is no run-of-the-mill grimoire. It's a 5th edition compatible expansion with over 400 new spells for every casting class. That's just the beginning. There's the new witch class, skilled with nature and the binding of spirits, and over a dozen subclasses. And magical styles, themed spell lists like fey magic or weather magic to flavor your casting. Not to mention the NPCs, the rolling tables, the spell customization and downtime activities. And this is the 2nd book. One lifetime might have been enough for the first, but surely you can see why I need more time. You might say, why die for this? Can't you just buy it in the Kobold Press store or on Drive-Thru-RPG? I mean, I guess, if you want the coward's way out, but I'm pretty sure you can only get the limited edition holographic foil covers if you sacrifice your mortality. Oh, no, turns out a limited number of those will be in the store soon. But I still don't regret it. Plus, I get skeleton friends.
So what separates a villain from a big bad? Most D&D parties defeat villains pretty regularly. After all, the act of playing D&D is inherently episodic, and in a system like D&D, where combat is a pretty big part of the gameplay, that necessitates a sort of monster of the week setup, where your party encounters creatures that need killing on a fairly consistent basis. What makes a big bad special is that they recur, and in order to recur, they have to be too powerful, or too slippery, or too sneaky, for the party to easily kill. They should be the looming specter over everything the characters do. Your job is to create a villain so threatening and so omnipresent that your players can't forget about them for long. There are a ton of different ways you can pull this off, but I'll give you a few examples. For instance, maybe you embed them in the setting. Make your Lich unavoidable, so your adventurers keep finding their bony little fingers stuck into everything as they navigate your world. Maybe your Lich is legendary and universally feared. The people of this area know that she exists, and so far they've survived by trying to stay out of her way. Yes, innocents have to die to feed her soul jar, but wouldn't the death toll only rise if they try to fight back? Or at least that's how it's been in the past, but now something is changing. More people are dying. The Lich has set her sights on some new goal, and standing by, hoping the next lost soul won't be yours is no longer an option. Or maybe your Lich hides their nature behind a secret identity, occupying a position of power like a lord or king, a royal advisor, the leader of a collective of mages. They've wormed their way into their system of choice, making themselves trustworthy and essential. Between their years of work building up relationships and respect, and their ability to magically influence those around them, the characters may fight an uphill battle, even getting anyone to believe that they're not who they seem. And once they make an enemy this well connected, things will get a lot more difficult for your players. Another great way to elevate your Lich from villain to big bad is to make it personal for your party. Stopping the Lich isn't just about being good citizens or heroes, it affects them intimately. Maybe your players, for whatever reason, know about or have access to the Lich's soul jar. They might not even have been looking for it. Maybe they stumbled across it during another adventure, or were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now they're a threat to the Lich, who needs to keep tabs on them and keep them in check. Or maybe your party faces the Lich early on in their game, before they know what they are. The Lich is weakened for some reason, vulnerable, and against all odds, the party defeats them, rescuing their innocent victims, looting their lair for all the arcane treasures they can carry. But little do they know, death isn't the end for this particular enemy. The Lich manifests a new form, rebuilds their strength, and makes a vow of vengeance against the ones who struck them down and stole their hard-won collection. However you do it, a big bad should keep coming up. Your players investigate some new horror and find that it all ties back to the Lich. When your party starts to feel comfortable or safe, the Lich pops up again to put the fear of God in them. The big bad doesn't always have to be front and center, but find ways to make sure that they never fully disappear. At this point, you have a big bad. Hooray! But like I said at the very beginning of this video, a big bad truly lives in the roleplay. So how do you roleplay your Lich? I've made dozens of videos about roleplay and character development, and while you certainly can go super deep with character expression, I think you really only need two things to have a good foundation for roleplay. The first is their persona. Basically, what are they like? How do they act and talk? What does it feel like to interact with them? If you need ideas for this, you can pick any of the decisions that you've already made about this character and just explore that. For example, let's take the Lich who has disguised himself and lives at the royal court. Maybe he'd be extremely practiced at courtly social graces, and he'd probably be a very confident and smooth liar. He's the type of villain to offer your party a fine aged cognac when he catches them sneaking into his lair, and sigh deeply when someone lobs the first attack because combat is just so uncouth and makes such a mess. Or consider how the fear of death and the limitations of time affect the ways that mortals act, and how we might behave differently if we didn't bear those burdens. Maybe your Lich just has absolutely no sense of urgency, because why would she? She's got all the time in the world. She'll tell a 2-hour story if you let her. She threatens the party that she'll be back to deal with them later, which could mean next week or could mean in 50 years. Or maybe her plan is to conceal herself and simply outlive the party. How long could that take? A few hundred years? That means instead of a game where the Lich hunts the party, they become the hunters. I generally feel like the more you think outside the box, the more interesting a character you'll create. And with your big bad, the last thing you want is to create something so cliche that it bores your players. If you pick just one personality trait that's outside the classic Lich archetype, you'll end up with a way more memorable villain. For example, instead of a cruel or violent or heartless Lich, imagine a melancholic one. After all, they've watched everyone they know and love die, and what's the point of forming new relationships when they'll all eventually meet the same fate? Maybe they truly feel that they're pursuing some higher purpose, to advance the field of arcane study, to solve some riddle that holds the world back from accessing magic's true power. They sacrificed everything for the greater good, even their own life. And it's truly tragic that the souls of innocents have had to be sacrificed for this work too. This Lich has carried the increasing burden of those deaths for hundreds or thousands of years, and they do that painful duty because if they don't, who else will? Whatever persona you settle on, just jot down a few adjectives. Your Lich is haughty and fastidious, or unhurried and self-effacing, or gloomy and forlorn. That's part 1 of your roleplay foundation. Part 2 is their motivation. I know this is a weird metaphor for a high fantasy context, but if the persona is the car, the motivation is the driver. Should I have done like carriage? The carriage and the driver? A car can look and feel and sound and smell in a million different ways, but that doesn't really affect whether it takes a left or right turn. That's entirely up to the driver. And for a character, that driver is their goal. So what is your Lich's goal? Once you know it, you can reference it whenever you need to ask yourself what your Lich would do. In most cases, this will be tied to why they became a Lich in the first place. Are they trying to ascend to godhood, to rule the world, to alter the past? This is another great place to shake things up and give your Lich some really unique flavor. For example, maybe she's obsessed with breaking down the barriers between animal and man and conducts horrible experiments where she uses magic and medicine to merge the bodies of several creatures, trying to create the ultimate being with all the best pieces of every species. Her lair is defended by a construct with the body of a dragon, the eye stalks of a beholder, and the brain of a mind flayer. If she wants to spy on the party, she sends out a creature stitched together from a roper and a mimic. Maybe she's even given her own undead body a few strategic modifications. The more successfully the players challenge her, the more interested she gets. Their minds and bodies are unique and valuable. What could she accomplish if she had access to them? Or maybe your Lich was a ruler who brought peace to a troubled land. As they grew older and still had no heir, they worried that after their death, things would once again descend into violence, war, and chaos. They became a Lich so that they could rule forever, the kingdom's eternal protector. What's a few innocent citizens' souls when weighed against guarding the entire kingdom from ruin? I mean, that's why we have presidential term limits, right? To prevent liches. So let's recap. Your Lich should 1. Include the staples of Lichdom, undeath, a soul vessel, and access to magic. 2. Be not just a villain, but a big bad who will provide a recurring threat throughout your campaign. And 3. Have a unique and memorable persona and motivation that you can use to bring them to life in your roleplay. What do you think? Ready to make your next big bad a Lich? I would love to make more videos like this about different kinds of iconic big bads. Mind flayers, dragons, hags, vampires. There are so many possibilities. It would be awesome to turn this into a series, but not to pull back the curtain, but that really only makes sense if this video does well. So if you'd like to see more, please consider feeding the algorithm the little engagement snacks that it values. Like the video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment letting me know what iconic or even underrated villain you'd like me to talk about next.